G'day, Lauren Kress here, and welcome to another episode of the Busy Brains Hub podcast. So today I want to talk about growth mindset, and I want to talk about it specifically in relation to ADHD and why growth mindset, some of the stuff that comes out of it can just feel really like, I don't know, I feel like it almost gives me the ick. I'm just like, oh, seriously? Like if I just try harder, I'll succeed? Like it. And I do wonder, like for others listening, whether you feel the same. It just doesn't quite hit. It seems to be like other people will be like, oh yeah, like, if you just persevere, everything will be fine. You just need to try harder. When you make mistakes, that's okay. That's all part of the learning process, and now if growth mindset is something that you find works for you, that's awesome. I'm not trying to undermine growth mindset as a whole. I just find some of the things that people say, some of the quotes that are meant to be inspiring that people share, it just really lands as very inauthentic and fake and frustrating. And so today I want to talk about it more from the sense of like, how can we reframe some of the things that have come out of growth mindset so that we can actually use it in a useful way as ADHDers. So I think it's worth first sharing that, look, a lot of people do find growth mindset empowering, and there is a reason for it, right? So the idea with growth mindset, and it was something that was sort of coined, it's a term that was coined by Carol Dweck, is that intelligence, our abilities aren't fixed. It's not like, okay, say we tried maths, we weren't good at maths, we will never be good at maths. That's a fixed mindset. A growth mindset saying, you're not good at maths yet. You can't do maths yet. It doesn't mean you'll never be able to do maths. We just need to find the right tools. But the problem is it does assume this sort of level playing field, and not everyone can do maths. If you have dyscalculia, I think that's how you say it, dyscalculia, I always find that word hard to say, which can be something that you could have alongside ADHD or something you could just have. That's going to make it pretty hard. If you have dyslexia, that's going to make it pretty hard to read. Doesn't mean that you can't consume content, no, but you might need to use a different strategy for it that doesn't involve just trying to do what everyone else is doing or what you were taught in school. Just you keep doing this. See, everyone else is doing this. You just keep doing this and you'll also be able to do it. That's been a sort of a myth that a lot of us have been sold about various aspects of our life. Now, in the case of ADHD, it can also be in terms of what we're trying to do at work, especially as adult ADHDers, where we're looking around and going, oh, everyone else can sit down from 9 to 5. Why can't I sit down from 9 to 5 and just get all my work done, And this growth mindset attitude, or the platitudes that come out of it, can be like, just keep showing up, just keep doing it. You just need to try a little bit harder. You just need to focus a little bit longer. And that can sort of have the opposite impact. That can send us into a shame spiral. That can be really triggering. Like if cognitive function isn't taken into consideration here, but we still want to grow, we still want to learn, what can we do instead? The way I thought that we could sort of work through this is by having a look at some of the common things that we're told in growth mindset and then sort of flip them on their head. Okay, so the first one that we get told a lot is, if I just put in the effort, I will succeed. If I just put in the effort, if I try a little bit harder, I will succeed. Okay, and as a lot of us already know, it's not from a lack of trying, right? It's not from a lack of effort. So instead of thinking through it like this, thinking about it more as like an experiment. If I did something differently, if I tried a different approach, could I get a different outcome? There's something else that's actually quite a common thing that people talk about, which is, if you keep doing this, I can't remember the saying, but it's like, like if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, that doesn't make any sense, right? So I think it's sort of like almost like some of these growth mindset things that they're sort of assuming that part of it, like try harder and try differently, but they don't say that. And for us, it might be like, actually, maybe not trying so hard, but trying differently. So instead of going, I didn't need to do more hours and I'll just keep working at this and I'll run 5 different experiments, that might also not be the answer either, right? That can put us at risk of burnout. And it's something that is really, really common amongst ADHDers and neurodivergent people, is burning out. So it's clearly not from a lack of trying. Okay, second one, mistakes help me learn. Mistakes help me learn. It sounds like it's true, right? Like, oh yeah, if you make a mistake, then you can learn from that mistake. But it also assumes that your working memory functions in a certain way so that you remember the mistakes at the right time in order to solve a problem. And again, that's something that if you've been diagnosed with ADHD, or if you experience a lot of ADHD symptoms, you could be self-diagnosed, you could be in the process of figuring this out, you could be neurodivergent in other ways, right? If our executive function is not working very well, how are we meant to just use those mistakes in a useful way? Instead of looking at it as, okay, mistakes help me learn, maybe it's like, look, mistakes could be helpful for a lot of people to learn. Sometimes it's useful for me, sometimes not so much. And instead of just doing the same mistakes over and over again, maybe it's time to look at a different structure. So if there's something that you do often as a mistake, one part could just be picking up that you're making a mistake. And then the next part could be like, okay, do I have some sort of self-reflection plan that I can do at the end of the day or at the end of the lesson? Okay, what went well today? What didn't go so well? The other thing that can help is practice, but we need practice with the right kind of coach, with the right kind of teacher, with the right kind of manager. So finding those supports, finding those people who can help us when it comes to actually learning from those mistakes. It makes me think of like when I was teaching swimming, right? I would teach kids of all different abilities. One thing that I noticed was that, and this was really honed in for us as teachers, was like, it's your responsibility to not let the child practice it incorrectly. As kids, all of us struggle with executive function in a way that like we don't as much as adults, but a 8-year-old who is functioning at a neurotypical level is still going to have higher executive function than say like a kid with ADHD, right? So they're like behind in terms of development, and we're meant to coach everyone so that everyone can learn. And one of the really important things was, okay, don't let them practice it wrong. Don't let them practice over and over and over again the wrong way of doing something. It's much harder to unlearn that. So yes, it's okay to make mistakes, but it's also our role as the teacher to help that student learn from that mistake, because we know what they're doing wrong. We can see it. And the problem is for adults with ADHD, we might not get to that point where we can see it for ourselves. That self-awareness is really tricky. So having external people looking and going, okay, and in a kind way, coaching us through, okay, so this was the mistake. What plan can we put in place to help you learn from these mistakes? And so that you don't keep making them. That's the thing, right? Mistakes help you learn, but the way it's talked about is like it helps you learn not to do them. Might not be the case for us with ADHD, especially with areas of our life where we find we have the most difficulty, where we find we have the most struggle. Another one is you can do it if you just believe in yourself. That's one that really bugs me. Okay, sure, it's important to have self-belief, but I also have no idea how that helps with doing something. Like, I believe in myself. Okay, great. How does that help my ability change, right? And I think the idea is that it's like, there's this other assumed part of it, which is that, yeah, you kind of need self-belief because otherwise maybe you won't even get started, right? And once you get started, then you can start to learn. But you also need to understand how your brain works. And there's some really great resources out there in terms of this. I've just gone down like a massive rabbit hole with Dr. Russell Barkley, who talks a lot about sort of the common adult ADHD issues around working memory, around executive function, and then how that can impact us in our lives. I found that really helpful to be like, oh, that's why. So other people can do this. Like other people can use their working memory in the moment to figure out how to do something better. I'm like, that's not really what happens for me. What happens for me is it's like I have to remember to go away, sit down and think about that, right? So understanding, okay, yes, self-belief is important, but for a lot of us, we've probably been taught in a way that didn't help us our whole lives, right? Like we're always behind in terms of, even if you did well at school or university, it's like there's other things that people just seem to get. Like you'd be like, I don't get what's happening in this movie right now. I don't understand that joke. I don't understand what was wrong with what I just said. I don't understand what the problem is here. I'm sort of trying to catch up, with what's just happened. So when that's the case, then it's also harder to have self-belief in the first place. So for some people, it might not even be a useful place to start. Is like, that might be a huge hurdle to be like, believe in yourself, and then you'll start learning. Maybe it's more like, okay, give it a go, and then you'll start to believe in yourself. If you want to start doing photography, if you want to get good at photography, maybe just trying to do photography first and taking photos and looking at what you can do is the first step. And then maybe you'll be like, oh, I'm actually really happy with how this looks. And then the self-belief comes from there, right? Like it's, how does your brain work in a way that's going to help you? How does your understanding how your brain works, and that a lot of people have these other advantages that we just don't have with this stuff. Okay, failure as a stepping stone to success. This is a really common one, right? It's just like failure is all part of the process, just part of the process. And I used to say this too. I ran my own business for a long time, and I was like, every entrepreneur says this: failure is part of success. Failure is a stepping stone to success. The problem is that failure can feel really, really bad. And again, it can send us into this like shame spiral. For me, what it meant was that a lot of the time I was fawning, I was people pleasing to try and make up for a mistake, for a failure, something that went wrong for a client, right? And it can also be hard in terms of boundaries then too. So instinctively we want to avoid that. I don't want to fail. I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want this to go bad. But also, it is inevitable. So how do we build some resilience around that? And how do we learn from that? So similar to where it's like finding systems that work for learning from your mistakes, it's the same thing here, right? Like, okay, is there a way that I can approach this so it doesn't feel so full on when I fail? And the thing that I found really helped, and a lot of entrepreneurs talk about too, is experimentation. So seeing everything as an experiment, and also even saying that to your clients, like, look, we haven't done this before. We haven't tried this before. So it's going to be a bit of an experiment. Looking at what's the best case scenario, the worst case scenario, and the most likely case scenario, and writing that down in a strategy document for yourself. Okay, worst case scenario, I fail at this. Again, best case scenario, this goes exactly as I planned. Neither of those might happen though. Most likely case scenario is probably going to be somewhere in between those two. There's going to be some wins, there's going to be some losses. How do I manage expectations around that for myself or for other people? Having a way to reflect can be really, really important. And actually what I found is that because I compensated for my fear of failure with experimentation, it actually gave me a way to, and this was at a time where I didn't know that I had ADHD or anything like that, it gave me an avenue to actually have a bit of a unique selling proposition, because other people were like, we just do XYZ, where I was like, well, this is new territory. And look, a lot of the time I feel like I'm in new territory. So this is my jam. I know how to navigate new territory because I know it's hard. I know it's uncertain, right? And that's okay. We can put some tools in place for this. And the last one, success comes from perseverance, right? Oh, okay. For some people, sure, success comes from perseverance. Probably the way we need to be thinking about this with ADHD is more like success comes from sustainable effort, or success comes from efforts that are sustainable. You know, if you have a tendency to hyper-focus, if you have a tendency to work yourself silly where you're doing 14-hour days, if you have a tendency to find it hard to be consistent, then this perseverance stuff is it just doesn't click, right? And again, if it's something that works for you and you've figured out how to use that, that's awesome. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's just, for me anyway, it just sort of, it really does, this kind of stuff really does give me the ick, because I'm like, no, that feels really impossible. To just persevere and be consistent is really tricky. So how do we figure out how to work with ourselves? How do we figure out, again, how we can sustain effort? And that doesn't mean do the same thing every day. It might be like sustain effort over 3 months, where we're looking at how do we break things into really, really small steps, and then how do we maybe use fluctuations in mood, motivation, however we're kind of working to our advantage. So for me, there's days where I'm like, I can't do much today. It's not going to happen. So you know what? Instead of trying to force myself to persevere, I'm gonna watch Netflix all day. That's going to be my day today. I'm going to just get by. I'm going to try to make sure I eat 3 meals. I'm going to try to make sure I still have a shower. I'm going to have my coffee. I might try to get outside. Today is a day that I do the bare minimum to try to still take care of myself. And that's about all I've got in me. And that's okay. And then on other days, I'm like, I have so much energy thinking, like I feel really creative. This is a good day for me to solve these problems. So it's like, that way of doing things is not how people talk about doing things. People don't talk about doing things in terms of bursts, usually. They don't talk about doing things in terms of not doing things, right? Like, there's so many times that I've talked to students as well, and I've been like, it's okay for you to relax. Like, but if you're procrastinating the whole time, that's not going to be very relaxing. That's going to be stressful, because the whole time while you're playing a video game, or you're spending time with your friends, or you're sleeping, or whatever it is, you've got in the back of your head, and when I say sleeping, I mean snoozing, like where you're still thinking, right? You're like, or you wake up, you're like, I feel really guilty I've been asleep. You procrastinate, I feel really guilty that I'm doing this right now. You've got that in the back of your head the whole time. That's not relaxing. It looks like relaxing from the outside, but it doesn't feel like relaxing from the inside. And so when we talk about perseverance, that looks really different for ADHD. Is it still perseverance? Yeah, probably it's still perseverance, but that's not how it feels. It feels like up and down. It feels like inconsistent. It feels like I can't possibly try harder than I'm already trying, and I am not getting anywhere with this. We really need to write these down in a way that works for us. So like, I just did this exercise with the help of ChatGPT, and if there's something for you that you're like, I really want to learn in this area, but I keep coming up against a wall, I keep feeling like I can't move forward with this, then maybe that's where you could look at, how can a sort of growth mindset 2.0 help me with this? Not these bullcrap platitudes, but like what it's trying to get to is more about, okay, I want this to change, and maybe I can do some other things to make it change that don't involve me just trying harder, putting in more effort. So that's sort of the question I wanted to leave you with, is like, what is that thing where you're like maybe feeling like a bit stuck at the moment? Is there an area of your life, is there a particular thing you're trying to do where you're feeling a bit stuck? And is there something that you could say to yourself that would be helpful? around this that would help with kind of finding a path forward. So for me at the moment, I'll leave you with this example. I am trying to practice my driving. I have my full license with driving, but most of the driving that I did wasn't in Sydney. It was like in Wollongong, and I drove mostly on highways doing like longer sort of trips, or if I was driving in Wollongong, it was short trips, but there wasn't a lot of traffic. And then I moved to Townsville, and then I moved to Sydney, and then I just didn't really drive that much because I didn't have a car. And recently I've been trying to do that again, but I've always kind of had anxiety around driving. It always feels like I can't work out everything that's going on in the road at the time. And I was having this discussion about this yesterday with someone, and they were saying like, you just need to practice. You just need to practice and you'll be fine. You won't feel like that anymore. And for me, it was like probably the worst thing I could have been told, because I'm like, every time I get in the car, it like completely hijacks my nervous system. It's really draining and exhausting, and it's not easy to practice. It's not something that feels like I can just change this overnight. Driving is really hard for me. At the best of times, it's really hard. It takes a lot of energy. And so I was thinking about it, what would be a good way to kind of maybe think about this differently. And I don't think it's about more practice. I think it's about obviously I will practice, but I don't think it's about, some people say drive every day. I'm like, there's no way. Like, I can't put my body through that. Feels so bad for me, like at the moment. Maybe it will change. I'm not saying I can't get better at it, but that feels really exhausting. It will make every day really hard to do the basic things, because it's like my nervous system just feels completely shot afterwards, right? So I was like, what would be more helpful? Probably a more helpful thing would be something like, okay, even though you're feeling really wrecked after doing this, you're still doing this once a week. That's really good. And can you see that there has been some changes? Yeah, there has actually. Like, it was like 100%. If I went like 100% nerves, anxiety and stuff at the first time, the second time it was maybe like 50%. And then since then, it's probably been like 25%, and when I do the same route over and over again, that's been sort of feeling more predictable, and that stresses my nervous system out a bit less. It's like, that's an insight, right? That's something where I'm like, okay, so it is getting better. It's just probably not the same method that everyone else uses. And maybe the method that everyone else uses won't work for me. I mean, maybe if I drove every day, I could get better faster, but the cost would be too high for me, so I don't want to do that. And so it's like I'm trying to talk to myself about it and kind of take myself off the hook a little bit, whilst not taking myself off the hook completely and going, oh, well, I'll never be able to drive, but just going, things are getting a little bit better. I'm going to give myself, there's no rush, but I need to be sort of committing to trying to do this at least once a week. And I can pick a day that feels like the day where there's the least amount of do and there's the least amount of stress. So yeah, that's what I'm figuring out at the moment. Let me know if this was helpful. You can drop a comment in Substack, or I'll pop little snippets of this on TikTok and on YouTube if you want to comment there as well. And I hope this has helped you to feel like you can live a little bit more of a balanced-ish life. And I will talk to you next time. Cheers.